Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Vino Frankel, a Taste of Sculpterra. It's our 9th episode where I bring you interesting facts about the wine industry, what's happening at Sculpterra, notes from the vineyard, from the winery, lots of stuff. We talk about animals, we talk about events, we talk about Paso Robles in the grand scheme and how things are headed and what we're doing. So, thank you for tuning in. Please remember to like this video, leave a comment, subscribe, ring the bell to receive notifications, all those wonderful things. Ask a question. I love questions. I want to come on and answer all your questions that you might have. So thank you for the support. And let's start with today's episode. Well, today's guest is Eddie Urman, who works for Turrentine Wine Brokerage. Thank you, Eddie, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, and I've worked with Eddie. I met him this year, and I was selling grapes, and he works for a brokerage. So obviously, he connects vineyards with wineries and wineries with vineyards, and he knows a lot about the grape growing industry as of right now. And he knows the history of Paso and where we're headed and where we're going, and uncertainties and how the grape market trends, all those wonderful things. So this episode, we're going to be really truthful and honest and give you the facts and not pull any punches, but tell you what's happening, because a lot of you have seen that there's grapes that didn't get harvested this year. There's vineyards that got torn out this year. There's vineyards that are being planted, new vineyards, old vineyards. Lots happening at Paso, and lots happening throughout the state of California. So we're going to take a deep dive into the grape growing industry for sure. Before we do that, I wanted to recap and just update you on the harvest. You see, I'm still wearing the harvest shirt. I haven't given it up yet. I want to take it off, but it just doesn't feel like complete. Tomorrow is the last day of pressing. That's when we drain the wine from the tanks. You're left with the mound of skins inside the tank. We shovel out the skins, load the skins into a basket press or a bladder press, and squeeze the last bit of wine out. That's how we press. So tomorrow's the last day. So we're pressing 2 lots of Cabernet Sauvignon that was picked November 4th. So this was a long fermentation, almost 3 weeks. So tomorrow will be, for me, the official end of the 2025 harvest. Last day of going to press. So very exciting. So I'll wear a different shirt, but it's been a very long harvest. I've repeated myself on this podcast many times. It's just felt very long, but it was fun. It was a good harvest. Some highlights, a little technical here, but the pH and TAs of the juice, the grapes that we picked were really solid this year. I think because of the cooler spring, cooler summer, even fall weather was cooler, that the grapes retain natural acidity, which helps the wine maintain its true color and helps the texture and mouthfeel and finish of the wines if they have good high natural acidity. So that was definitely up this year. Once we had that rain, October 13th and 14th, that really changed everything. After that rain, it was a struggle to get the grapes any riper than they were before the rain. So it's kind of a harvest set into different segments. The first part of the harvest, high bricks, good acid. The second part of the harvest was lower bricks, but again, the acids were still in check. It still worked out, but yeah, so tomorrow's our last day of pressing. I did do a few new things this year I haven't mentioned yet on the podcast, where I bought, this is going to be our 20th anniversary making Cabernet from our Hilltop block. We opened the tasting room in 2007, but our first vintage was 2005, which 2005 was an incredible year. A lot like 2023, where we had 25 plus inches of rain. I think we had over 30 inches of rain in 2025. 2005, that was an El Nino year. So it's this year, 2025, marks our 20th year making Cab from the Hilltop block. So I'm doing a special wine label, just 100 cases from that block. And I purchased these amazing French barrels, Estancia and Reserva, which is like the cream of the crop, best barrels you can buy from Demtos Cooperage from from Demptoast, and I'm excited about these barrels. So it's only 4 barrels of wine. That's only 100 cases, 25 cases per barrel. It's going to be, when I bottle it, it'll be wine club only, limit 2 bottles per person. We might not even taste it, or we'll just taste it during a special event. So wanted to let you know about that. That's going to be bottled in 2027. So we got plenty of time for that wine to age and mature and to soak up all that wonderful wood that we're aging in. All right. So harvest is wrapping up, very much wrapping up. Eddie, I'm going to ask you some questions to kind of get things going. I want you to share, how you got started and your grape growing background. I know you're from Paso and you went to Cal Poly. Is that correct?
That's correct. So yeah, my name is Eddie Urman. I work for Turrentine Brokerage. I'm the Central Coast Grape Broker. I started in the wine industry a year or two out of college. I went to work for a gentleman here locally. His name's Troy Giavotti. Started running his vineyards and labor crews kind of at a young age. So started that. I was actually still firefighting. That was my goal, was to become a firefighter. And
right.
roads kind of transitioned to where it made more sense to pursue a degree in wine and viticulture. So switched up my degree, went to Cal Poly, worked full time while I was at Cal Poly for Troy, and then when I kind of hit an impasse there and needed more growth than was available, I went to work for a company called Vino Farms, and I farmed. I kind of quickly progressed up the ladder at that group and farmed about 4,000 acres for them in 12 different ranches in Paso. And then last year took the opportunity to come to work for Turrentine Brokerage as the Central Coast Grape Broker.
Fantastic. So, as a grape broker, your job is to sell grapes. So how has your experience as a vineyard manager helped you in your grape sales and what you do now?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I believe that, well, first off, I was involved in sales at my last 2 companies and trying to finish out deals. But my background in viticulture and farming, I believe, helps me really talk to the vineyard and what it can provide. I like to tell people I can typically talk to what practices are being done in the vineyard that should result in a higher quality outcome or wine. It's not always the case. I have vineyards that don't present well, don't show well, that make fantastic wine. And I've sold what I thought were the best grapes I've ever farmed or seen and made not very nice wine. So the wine industry is a lot of fun because it is complex and it's not always, judge a book by its cover. Sometimes that can be inaccurate, but I think those qualities and being able to talk to what a certain manager or outfit is doing in the vineyard and how it should relay to quality wine is beneficial.
Yeah, before we started today's podcast, you and I were talking about the aesthetics of vineyards and different pruning methods versus like cane pruning, VSP, cordon trained. And yeah, when you go to a vineyard and you see all the fruit hanging perfectly and the leaves are pulled and it looks immaculate, well cared for, you would assume like, oh, this is going to make the best wine. And when you see a vineyard that's the grapes are growing in the shade and the leaves are covering the fruit and it's hard to find the clusters, you might think, oh wow, this is a recipe for disaster. It's gonna get mildew and disease. There's no light and airflow. But like you said, it all has to do with the type of grape. Like I've done lots of Cabernet. We've trained Cabernet on cordon with leaf pulling and shoot thinning and all that maintenance, and then we've done cab cane pruning where you have lots of canes and the fruit is separated and hangs and there's a lot more leaves. And yeah, it doesn't look as pretty, but the more leaves you have, the more photosynthetic material, the more sugar can be created in the grape. And cab is a hardy grape, so it may not look the best on the vine. The vines might not look the prettiest and well kept, but a Cabernet vine with a lot of leaves has a lot of potential for high bricks. So I'm a believer in cane pruning, but I've had that same experience. I've shown winemakers, vineyards, hey, do you want my cane prune cab or my VSP prune cab? And they always want the VSP prune cab. And then I'll have them taste the wine. Or this is the cab that was cane prune. This is the cab that's VSP. And the cane prune cab has balance and complexity and dark color. And it's like, wow, this wine is great. Yeah, it doesn't, the vines might not look as manicured, but it's balanced. So it's all, balance. The grapes have to be, the vine has to be balanced with the right amount of vigor and capacity and clusters. So,
yeah, and there's so many ways to make great wine. I think that's part of what makes our job fun as well. Is that, as to what you're alluding to, a cane prune vineyard that somebody may perceive as lower quality or not as desirable may produce wonderful wine, and part of that could be due to the viticulture, the site, the rootstock, the clone, farming practices, fertilization programs, or the winemaking itself. So it's never just a simple cookie cutter, like, you take this cool grape, you put it in a barrel, and it turns into a nice bottle of wine. It's much more complex than that.
Yeah, and it always goes back to the site. It's what the site gives you, what the land gives you. And if you're on a high clay soil with high nitrogen in the ground and just a lot of nutrients and fertilizer or whatever, the vine wants to grow a lot. Right. So the vine is producing long shoots, long canes, lots of leaves. So instead of trying to take all that away from the vine, why don't you complement the vine by letting it have a lot of fruit, right? Because it's capable of ripening that crop if it has such a big canopy. So I think it comes back to the site. And if you're on, if you're on sandy soils or clay soils, or if you're on a hotter zone or a colder zone, you have to know your site. And I know you spend time walking through vineyards and seeing the differences of sites and soils and topography and landscape. And then it comes back to experience that there's a vineyard manager who's been there at that vineyard for 10 years and he knows his site, and he knows this block at 3 tons per acre makes perfect balanced wine. But this block at 7 tons an acre does fine too. I mean, our Grenache, which is an acre and a half, we've gotten 15 tons on it, so that's like 8 tons per acre. And it's high bricks, great acidity, good color, tasty grapes. So you wouldn't think that would happen, but it's a good site, really good site.
100%. And as a manager, it's your job to take the site that you have and the vines you have or infrastructure and produce the best possible quality or outcome. And we're skipping over something that's, I think, really important too, is that economic viability is the most important thing for most growers, right? I mean, we talk about sustainability all the time. That's wonderful. But I think at times we forget that sustainability starts with profitability. And it's not that you need to make money hand over fist, but if you can't stay in business, point blank, you won't be a part of the industry. So, part of that equation is the yield you can achieve, the cost of your inputs, and ensuring that is equating to a number that makes sense for the farmer. And right now in this time in the industry, that's something that's extremely difficult to achieve, if not unachievable.
Okay, Eddie, what is your favorite part of your job?
Favorite part of my job is working with all the different parties. I get an opportunity to interface with people like yourself, growers. It's kind of fun because you're a grower and you make your own wine, right? So you've got both hats on. But I get to work with grower relations reps who really are just a part of trying to source and figure out what fruit they should buy and for their programs. I get to work with winemakers who are looking for something very selective, and then I get to work with growers too who are trying to provide that product for those wineries or grower relations reps to purchase. So I really enjoy that. I get to expand my territory too, because I get to work all the way up into, it's just south of San Jose, like San Benito or Santa Rita Hills, San Lucia Highlands. And I get to go all the way down to Santa Rita Hills and Santa Barbara County. And it's very, very different, expectations, qualitative capacities, yields, all those things vary greatly in the Central Coast,
What is your favorite? That's not your favorite part. What is your least favorite part of your job? Least favorite.
The least favorite part of my job is just that I think coming into this position right now and this time in the industry is extremely challenging, and it's tough to watch good people, good growers, good wineries struggle, and there's no way around it right now. There's a lot of people who are struggling, and some that will unfortunately not be in business moving forward. So that's what's very, very difficult, is not being able to, in my opinion, help certain parties. as much as I'd like to.
Right, and that's a good segue and leads me into our next section, which is the wines of the world. Wines of the world. So every week I try to bring you some news about the grape growing industry as a whole. Well, happening today, before I get into that, is Trump's tariffs on Italy and France, the tariffs on wine. You know about this, right, Eddie? These tariffs?
I'm aware of some of the tariffs.
So
you might have some news.
I've been a proponent of this kind of thing related to alcohol and wine because it should help California wines sell and California grapes sell. If it's harder for us or if it's more expensive for Californians to outsource their wine purchasing, if they're buying wine from France and Italy and then they're blending it with Californian wine rather than buying grapes or wine from California, it makes a lot of sense to me that we should be supporting our own state, our own nation, and buying our own wine, which we have plenty of, especially right now. So that's happening right now, and that's going into effect. So we'll see how that all unfolds and what happens. But Eddie, I wanted you've alluded at it a couple times, but yeah, what's happening right now in the world of wine, especially in California? Vineyards going out or vineyards replanting, retooling, what exactly is happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think to summarize it, we are going through probably one of the worst downturns our industry has ever seen. I mean, going back 20, 30, 40 years, Turrentine's been around for 53 years. There's parties at my company who've been in the wine industry for 40 years. We can't really point to a time in where the industry was as down as it is now. So I think there's a whole host of reasons of why we're here. But the general synopsis is that we very much oversupplied our industry. We planted way too many acres of grapes. We made way too much wine. And in that, some of that was due to COVID, some was due to fires, host of things throughout our state that have taken place, and through the last 4 or 5 years. Coming off of that, people are drinking less wine. We are selling less wine. So, we oversupplied at a time where demand was going down. Mm-hmm. And so we essentially have to chase ourselves downward where we continue to make less and less wine to the point to where we rebalance our supply with demand. And the big question mark is just, where does demand level out? Is demand leveling? Lots of the times the information we get is delayed. We look at sales from a year ago. Nobody can predict what sales will be in 6 months or a year, even though it's some people's jobs to try to predict that. And that if you're making a bottle of wine, I mean, you're making a bottle of wine today to sell in 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
So the synopsis is, we're still systemically oversupplied, whether it be case goods, bulk wine, or grapes available.
Right. And so would you say we're going through a correction in the grape industry as a whole, that things are going to come back soon?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to get into kind of philosophical, opinions on that, because we don't have the data yet to really show us that we're at the bottom and things are going to get better. But we do know that historically, each time there's been a correction in our industry, there's been a downturn that then plateaus and upswings again. So it's done that, cycled many, many times longer than I've been alive. With that said, I think we're talking about this as more of a reset than a correction. So, I mean, we're really going through a major transition in our industry, where some of the large players will no longer be large players. Some of the medium players will be larger players. Some small players will become medium players. This is very different than anything we've gone through, like the '08 recession or some of the crashes per se we've had in the industry before.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, was the big players, because it used to be, hey, we have 100 acres of grapes unsold, mm-hmm. and we can try to sell them to individual wineries, but it was always at the end that the big guys would swoop in or come in, and they'd pay you a lower price. Say you were getting $1,000 a ton. Well, maybe at the end, some of the bigger players would buy it for $500 a ton. But at least you got the fruit off the vine, and you sold to some of the bigger players. But that's not happening, correct? I mean, you didn't see a lot of that this year.
We haven't seen a lot of that the last 2 years. And that's largely due to those big players having too much inventory, whether it be case goods or bulk wine. We talk to large parties who say they have enough inventory for a vintage should last 12 months, right? If you make the goal as a winery is you want to buy enough grapes to make wine for 12 months and sell it on the store shelf for 12 months and then cycle into your next year, because that's how long a year is 12 months.
Right.
There's a lot of wineries that have 18 months worth of a vintage, or some say even longer. And so they're having to make up that gap of how much extra vintage they have, how much extra wine they have for a certain vintage by buying less of the next vintage or a vintage 2 years down the road. So because of that, we have not seen what we'd like to call additional demand or replacement demand for that wine at this time.
Yeah, and it's always this way in farming too, where things are going great and you're selling your crops, so you plant more, right? Or Syrah, for example, was the next big thing. Everyone started to plant Syrah, which Syrah grows fantastically in Paso Robles. We should be planting Syrah, but we try to jump on the bandwagon, so we all plant, and then it takes 3 to 4 years for the vines to get into their full production. And then by that point, maybe the next big grape comes around, and then you shouldn't have planted so much Syrah. You should have diversified. Yeah. But because it takes time for the grapes to produce, we're always trying to find out, what's the next big thing in the vineyard.
Well, this, ups and downs in our industry is nothing new. We have always been cyclical. We've always gone up, we've gone down. There's been what we call short markets, which are buyers markets, to long markets, which are sellers markets, or excuse me, reversed. So we go from ups and downs all the time. Turrentine has, if you've seen some of our presentations, we have the Turrentine wheel, which describes, kind of the cycle that we go through periodically over a number of years. And sometimes we used to say it takes 7 years or 5 years was a healthy, normal cycle. We can't even point to that right now because none of this is healthy or makes any sense. But all we know is we're oversupplied and will likely be undersupplied before we know it. The question is just when, right?
Right. And with all this being said, the quality is high. We've had excellent vintages, 2023, 24, and this year, the wines we made, the wines I've tried from other growers and wineries, that's the funny thing about all this is even though wine sales are down and grape sales are down, and there's retooling, the wines themselves
It's one of the frustrating things about right now is that our industry has gotten better and better at making really nice wine. You can buy some very cheap wines on the shelf that are really nice, and it's because we've gotten better and better at what we do as an industry. So it's more and more competitive. I'd say it's more competitive now than it probably ever has been to produce a quality product. The consumer doesn't even desire it; they demand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a lot of wine too, and that's why we're doing a sale on Black Friday, which we're doing 60% off, but just for a few hours, 6 to 10 a.m. So I have Miguel behind our studio here. Thanks, Miguel. This is, by the way, we're in Miguel's Paso Robles podcast studios, and Miguel's going to queue up a video. I just recorded this yesterday to announce our Black Friday sale. Let's put on our headphones, and it's a short video. It's 45 seconds, and we put it on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and off she goes. All right, Miguel, hit it. Black Friday. I'm talking about our biggest sale of the year here at Sculpterra, Friday, November 28th, here at the tasting room, but just between the hours of 6 to 10 a.m. Come early, Black Friday morning, get a cup of coffee, and a donut, and enjoy 60% we get a big crowd of people that show up early in the morning. And
of any of our Sculpterra
we don't do
wines,
wine tasting at that
wine,
time.
Our Sculpterra wines,
it's too early
the
for
varietal
tasting,
wines, the reserve wines, the blends, everything that you could find at the tasting room.
Tell us what they want.
You can also place your order online.
Take it to their car.
Click
It's
the
real,
link in our bio,
very,
go to our website,
high-paced.
place an order, and we'll ship the cases to you. This is the only sale we do throughout the year that's open for everybody, all customers. Remember, it's just between the hours of 6 to 10 a.m. Friday, November 28th.
We have lots of folks
place
that
your
are
order,
waiting for
off
this
you
sale.
go.
They know
Enjoy
all about
amazing
it.
savings at Sculpterra.
Yeah, so this is a week. Well, yeah, because by the time you're watching this podcast Friday, the sale is next Friday, November 28th. So I'm excited. Every year it gets bigger and bigger. Like the sale has just gone up and up and up and up and up. So I'm curious to see what happens this year. I think it's going to be huge. And what's nice is because we have a big inventory and we've been making lots of wine, we're not sold out of anything. We have, last year we did this, we were out of Viognier, we were out of, I think, Mega Focus, Petit Syrah. This year we've got everything. I'll have it all outside on pallets on our old crush pad there and organized, and the folks could see everything that's available, and we'll hand them a list. But yeah, it's all available. So we get lots of people that come and buy wine for a family member's wedding or for a big event. They'll buy 8 cases and then they're set for the year. And some folks drive up from San Diego or from the Valley or San Francisco. They come to get there at 6 a.m. and buy wine. So I love it. And a lot of locals come out, because it's at the tasting room early in the morning. It's after Thanksgiving. People are rolling out of bed and they're doing their Black Friday shopping. So come on out tomorrow, next Friday, to experience it and pick up some wine. But are you going to come out, Eddie, and get some wine?
I'll be out of town, unfortunately. Be up in Oregon.
Yeah, the other
events. Be there.
To just continue here with the other events. So that's next Friday. But today, Friday, I'm pouring at Albertsons here in Paso. I do this a couple times a year. It's great. The Paso Albertsons sells 8 of our wines. So I'll be pouring few of the wines that they have on the shelf, and then I'll be pouring some wines that they don't have that are sold at the tasting room. So if you're doing your grocery shopping today around 4 to 5:30 p.m. at Paso Albertsons, you can come and meet me and see it and taste some wine. You can taste wine while you're grocery shopping. You have to stay within the wine aisles there, but pretty cool experience. Saturday, the day after Black Friday, so Saturday, November 29th, the Backroads Wineries, which is a group of us here on the east side of Paso that are family-owned small boutique wineries. We're doing a Thanksgiving Meet the Backroads, Meet the Winemaker dinner. I think there's 20 plus wineries that are participating, and they're doing it differently this year, where it's a catered dinner, but it's the winery's responsibility to supply the wines. So like I don't have the menu in front of me, but the first course is a salad, and then it's duck and chicken and tri-tip. So I'm going to bring wines that I feel are going to pair perfectly with that meal, and then I might bring a Magnum, open some library wines or some special wines. So there's still time to get tickets. I think they're close to being sold out. It's at Cass Winery, Steve Cass and Ted, who right down the road from us. They have it. It's in their event center, which has been open for a few years now. It's beautiful. It's, after Thanksgiving, you're probably tired, worn out from all the cooking that you've done. Come out to this and we'll serve you a meal and some fantastic wine. So that's Saturday, November 29th. Then we've got our authors showcase, which we talked about at length last week. Here's our poster here, December 6th at Sculpterra. We've got lots of authors coming to sell their books, display their books, meet each other. It's going to be it's our first time doing anything like this. So I'm excited about that. And then Thursday the 18th is our Christmas event, which we do a reenactment of the nativity, sing Christmas carols and songs and carriage rides. Really fun. And I checked the weather. It doesn't say it's going to rain that week, but far away to tell. We'll see. I'm excited. Should be really fun. All right. Well, we're up to my too much information about Paul's life. TMI. I wanted to talk about kind of, now that Eddie's here today, to talk about how we got started when we sold grapes. Because initially, we planted we planted Cabernet early on in 1993, and my father wanted to make wine, but we didn't have a winery, so that wasn't an option at that time. So we sold fruit. And we sold to a winery called Fetzer. Eddie, have you heard of Fetzer? Do you remember Fetzer? Yeah. They became Brown Forman, or they were Brown Forman.
Fetzer's, I think, still around in some capacity. I think it's part of the Bonterra group, I believe.
What was amazing is they gave us a per acre contract. So it wasn't, we're buying 4 truckloads, 22 tons per truckload. It was, we'll buy your whole block, whatever you get, that's what we'll take. Which again, I mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. So we got to farm it how we saw fit for the most balanced vine. Maybe we didn't want to overcrop it to where the grapes aren't going to become ripe. We didn't want to undercrop it to where it comes in early and we don't produce a lot of fruit. So that was great. And it was a multi-year acreage contract we had with them. And our Cabernet, the vines we got were from Antonio Rendon, who passed away this year. He was just an incredible guy. He lived on Hanson Road, right behind our podcast studios, right here off Lene. Just a wonderful man. And he gave us cuttings, or we purchased cuttings from his vineyard, Cabernet cuttings. So these are, when it's a cutting, it's taken from a currently growing vine. It's not a vine on a grafted rootstock, the rootstock and a Zion separately. It was just a cutting. You just take a pruning, stick it in the ground, it sprouts roots, and there you go. So I think that's also one of the reasons why our Cabernet has a different taste to it, and why it's so good. Why it doesn't produce a lot of fruit. Why it's more balanced, because it's not on a vigorous rootstock that's drought tolerant and salt resistant and phylloxera resistant. All these things. It's just a cutting that was transplanted to. Well, we started it in a nursery, and when the vines got big enough, we transplanted them into the vineyard. Eddie, have you experienced this kind of thing where you just cuttings?
Yeah. No, we some people would call it nowadays. You can get own rooted vines.
Own rooted,
so
yeah.
Own rooted vines is basically exactly that. It's just a cutting, so there's no rootstock.
Have you noticed that own rooted vines produce less fruit? Have you seen a correlation with that?
I have not seen a correlation with that as far as yield potential. Maybe certain varieties or certain clones, because there are major differences within yields within different clones. So it's surely possible that different clones would yield differently.
Yep. But yeah, it was great that they gave us a per acreage contract. That was wonderful. So we sold to Fetzer, and then from there we sold to Castoro. Mm-hmm. From Castoro we sold to J. Lohr, which we met Steve Peck because he worked at Fetzer, and then he became the winemaker at J. Lohr as well. So we had a great relationship and did that. Sold grapes up till 2005. 2005 was our first year where we took the plunge, sold most of the grapes, but kept some to make our own wine. So we started the winery. But so we were in the grape growing business to sell fruit. Now we've transitioned from selling grapes to growing grapes for making wine for our own needs. That's why we've been taking out vineyards as well. We took out Merlot last year, which we're going to taste the 2021 Merlot at the end of this episode. We're going to replant 2 acres of Merlot. We had 8 acres of Merlot, but after looking at our sales and looking at what we want to plant, we're just going to replant 2 acres of Merlot. It's a great wine, and it's a good site, but we're going to plant more Grenache, Mourvedre, Petit Syrah, Cab Franc, and Syrah. Those are the 5 grapes that we don't have enough of. So we too are kind of going through a retooling time in the vineyard, and taking out some of the Cabernet to plant some of those lesser known grape varietals. Eddie, have you seen this as well? Have you seen people pulling out some of the larger acreage to plant smaller blocks of lesser known grapes?
Yeah, I think there's probably access to more varietals of grapes in form of wine than there ever has been, as the industry's tried to branch out and introduce other types of grapes, types of wine. It's an interesting topic because, yes, a lot of people are diversifying, and everybody wants to know what the next hot thing is. My personal opinions may differ than others, or even Turrentines for that matter. But, I think it's good to do. It's beneficial, and there's some awesome, whether it's Italian varietals, Greek varietals, there's all sorts of fun things out there. What I will say, as far as what the consumer buys in large, you should really pay attention to where you're marketing it, because I think there's still, we still sell mostly Cab and Chardonnay. But I want to say, I'm not looking at the numbers, but 70% or something, 60% of the wine sold, or 80% is probably Cab, Chard, and Pinot. So it's good. The new varietals are a lot of fun, and a lot of them are fantastic wines. But you should look at your market and who you're selling it to, because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is supply what the consumer is demanding. You know, we don't. I think it is an industry. We know wine, and so we want to push certain types of grapes and wine on people because we know it's going to be, you know, is technically better. But at the end of the day, they're the buyer, they're the consumer, they're the one with the purchasing power. So it's our job to produce, in my view, what the consumer wants to buy.
Yeah, next week we're going to be talking about Mourvedre, and that's just what Eddie's talking about. I mean, Mourvedre grows fantastic in Paso. It makes great rosé, it makes great red wine, great in blenders, but is it ever going to be a household name, Mourvedre? I mean, it's not a nice name. It's a strange name. But Cabernet is king, Chardonnay is queen. We talked about this last week, and I totally agree. You know, you have to watch what the consumer is buying. It's fun to introduce these new grapes and see, you know, maybe make a small amount of that as a reserve or as a limited production or just for the wine club, but you can't go wrong with Cabernet. I mean, it grows in every climate, it seems. Also Chardonnay, I mean, it's very adaptable in cool climates, hot climates, different soils. But Mourvedre is a fantastic wine. We only grow an acre and a quarter, so we are planting more of that. But I completely agree. You know, we have to watch what the consumer wants.
Yeah. Well, it depends where you're going to market it. Like for you guys at Sculpterra, you have great foot traffic in your winery. It's wonderful to be able to pour those different varieties that people may not have been introduced to. But if you're going to put it on the store shelf and compete with the other, you've been into Albertsons, as you've alluded to, they have a wonderful wine selection, but it's in some ways overwhelming at times. And if you have a unique varietal, oftentimes that at that point, that consumer is not willing to really venture out and try something new. They want to buy cab that they know that they think will be good, or a Pinot or a Chardonnay, versus try Mourvedre, a standalone Mourvedre for the first time.
Okay, well, moving on. Animals in the vineyard, my fun section where we talk about some animal or insect. I've been in the insect mode recently. So today we're talking about mealybugs, which I'm bringing this up because it's really interesting. This is not a good insect. It does a lot of damage, and it was never in Paso Robles. I went to Cal Poly. That was the first time I saw it. It was in the Cal Poly, in the student vineyard. I found it there, but I never saw it in Paso until maybe 6 years ago. And it's a little insect that can get on your clothes. So if there's a crew of 12 people that prune one guy's vineyard and then they move to the next vineyard the following day, and the mealybug gets on their shirt and they're real up close to the vine, it can jump on that vine. So here's a picture of mealybugs. I'm sure everybody has seen this. They infect a lot of flowers, roses. You see them on roses all the time. They're hard to eradicate because they overwinter. They dormant. They go sleep. They come back. They can produce, I think it's eight
Generations.
Yeah, 8 generations every year. Mm-hmm. So, Eddie, you've seen mealybugs. You've dealt with mealybugs. How do we get rid of these guys? What do we do?
Well, as far as getting rid of them or eradicating them, it can prove difficult. There are multiple species of mealybug that infect grapevines. You know, vine mealybug is the most prolific and the most problematic, followed by grape mealybug and oblong mealybug. I think they're obtuse. I might be messing it up. The one that we see the most problem in wine grapes right now is vine mealybug. The good news is there's more tools in the tool chest to treat them than there ever has been, regarding whether it be pheromone mating disruption, which just basically prevents the male from finding the female and prevents reproduction or slows it down, or contact sprays or products. We probably have more available now than we ever have. The problem with it is it's not an isolated, per your comment, is that you hadn't seen it previously. It's been around for 20, 30, 40 years, maybe more, who knows. It's been around for a long time. And it spreads, as you said. You know, it spreads whether it be through people, through equipment, through animals, birds,
Mm-hmm. Deer,
you name it. It can be spread all sorts of ways. So the systemic control is what we need to really get a handle on it. And some areas have done a really good job. Vine mealybug is also a vector for viruses, so it can spread. So we can do Pierce's disease,
Leaf roll,
red blotch, handful of different diseases that are viruses that are very problematic and decrease the lifespan or viability of grapevines. So it's a problematic insect, and some areas have been dealing with this for many, many years, and they've made good headway in reducing the populations. And through that's all through these new technologies that we have today, whether, pheromone traps and so on and so forth. But eradicating them proves to be very difficult.
Yeah, but they eat the phloem, or they get into the phloem of the vine and eat the sugar, the sucrose from the vine. But then they get moved around by the Argentinian ant, which is they have a symbiotic relationship, right?
Yeah, so the mealybug will secrete a honeydew, which is a sugary substance that the ant then takes to feed its population, right? So there is some sort of symbiotic relationship between an Argentinian ant and the vine mealybug. So control of both Argentinian ants and vine mealybug helps prevent spread.
And ants are hard to control. At Cal Poly, we did trials to try to control the ants. It was the professor said, if you can control the ants, it'll control the mealybugs. But ants are proven difficult to control, though. Sure. It's a tough pest. We're dealing with it, but like Eddie was saying, if you can stay on top of it, and I love that you can disrupt the mating with the pheromones. That's just pretty wild, and the male can't find the female. He's flying around looking, can't find it.
And the good news is that it takes, to my point, or I was trying to say earlier, but I'll say it more clearly now, is it takes the overall industry to be working on it. If you're solely, putting out the pheromone traps and controlling it on your vineyard, but your neighbor's not, eventually they're going to continue to move in from that neighboring property. So what we've seen in areas that have major problems is that the growers are working together. Yeah. And everyone's on the same page about working to prevent spread, working to reduce populations.
Yeah, there we go. So there's the ant moving the mealybug around. It's pretty wild to see. All right, so transitioning from mealybugs to nerd out on wine. Want to keep this short today, but I just wanted to talk about blending. I get questions all the time. How I blend, how do I do this? Am I really tasting until I'm blue in the face, trying different combinations of wines? Well, I'm really quick when I blend. I always start out with a goal. Like, okay, I'm trying to put together a light-bodied wine, a dessert wine, a wine with a big finish. So I have a general goal. Say I'm doing a Cabernet-based blend. Well, I want Cabernet to be the focal point, and then I'm adding these other smaller blenders like Cab Franc, Merlot. We're going to taste those in a second, to help the wine in some way. Sometimes I get wines that maybe are low in alcohol, so they have a thin finish, or wines that have a high alcohol that the finish lingers too long and it tastes hot, has some heat to it. So I'll blend a lower alcohol wine to balance it, to compensate for that. So I've also learned with blending, I'm doing a blending party. This is a good time to say that, in February 28th, Saturday, doing a blending party for our wine club members, or anyone can come, buy a ticket. I'm also quick when I blend. I don't spend so much time smelling and tasting. I create, whatever percentages, and if I like it, I go with that. I don't just keep trying and trying and trying, because you could overdo it. And also, people ask, can you really taste, 2% of this or 3% of that? I think with my own palate, at least, I can't really pick up anything less than 5%. If you have, if your wine is 95% Cab and 5% Petit Verdot, you might be able to taste that. But anything less than 5%, it's really, maybe you're putting it for the marketing so you can say it's Cabernet and Petit Verdot. But blending is fun, and on that note, actually, everything is a blend. When we're bottling Syrah, it's 100% Syrah. Well, it's a blend of new barrels. Maybe we have new French barrels, Hungarian barrels. Maybe we had I had 2 tanks of Syrah, and one Syrah had yeast D254. The other tank had Syrah D80. I fermented them separately, pressed them off separately, barreled them separately, and then blended them when we bottled. So essentially, it was 2 lots of Syrah that came together. So everything is some sort of a blend. And in Paso, there's no rules, right? If you're in France, you can't blend grapes in the Rhone with grapes in Burgundy and Bordeaux. You can't, you have to only, there's certain wine laws, restrictions on what you can do. We don't have any of those restrictions and laws. We can just make the best wine that we intend to make, blending whatever we want to. So blending is great. Go to our website, go to the store page. You'll find out more about our blending party happening in February. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of like this podcast. I get into depth about grape growing, winemaking, my general thoughts about blending and tasting, and it's a great time. All right, well, let's do some questions. Eddie, I'm going to ask you these questions because, like me, you are a vineyard manager. You have a lot of experience. So, how long can a grapevine live? I get this question a lot. How long can a grapevine live?
Well, I think you have to categorize it in two different categories. One is how long can it truly survive and be alive? And I think there's record of vines that are well over 100 years old that'll still produce some fruit. The second category is economically viable. So how long can they live and be economically viable? And the industry typically looks at that at around 25 years of a lifespan for economic commercial vineyard. So for like a hobby vine, they can live a long time. And the other answer to this is that every single vine is technically grafted or propagated, right? So the more like a deep rooted whatever theory of it is like, well, you're actually taking a clone of that vine and grafting it, and a clone and a clone and a clone. So you may be technically the parent material that is exactly identical to what you planted in the ground today. It's the same exact thing. So is that vine, been reincarnated in your new planting? So if that's the case, if that's the way you want to view it, most of the clones we work with today are ancient.
Yeah, and it's also interesting. Vines are a lot like people in the sense they have their youth stage, their mature stage, their elderly stage. And as vines get older, they're more susceptible to disease and they get weak. Older people get weak. It's just the facts of life, right? So they have a cycle. And you have to make a determination as a grape grower. Should I keep these vines going? Every year more of them are dying. They're more disease prone. It's a time to start over, rip them out and plant new vines that'll give me another 25 years. So isn't there a vine in Santa Barbara that's like 200 years old? It's like the size of a tree and it produces a ton of grapes, just one vine.
Sure. I'm sure there is. Yeah. There's like I said, plenty of examples, history of vines that are very, very old.
Yeah, my next question, which we answered or partially answered, is when do vines reach their prime years? When is that peak time, would you say?
Well, I think it depends on the perception of the party that's making wine out of it. There's some people who firmly, grow and propagate and farm very old vineyards, 40-year-old vineyards, and they swear by those grapes off those old vineyards. The industry typically views the best quality out of younger plant material. So younger vineyards from, say, 6 to 12, 15 years old is typically commercially what people will desire. And there's some reasons for that. We've come a long ways in the industry as far as cleaning up plant material and producing, virus-free, whatever, vines that are going to live longer and produce better quality. So there's many years ago, before we had these kind of technologies, the standard vineyards that we would propagate were typically already infected with red blotch. Cab Franc is a variety that I use as kind of an example because older Cab Franc vineyards, say just 10 years ago or so, the material, I think the UC Davis came out and said, or UC came out and said that the material we've been using for all these years to plant Cab Franc was actually virused. They just didn't know. They hadn't identified the virus. Mm-hmm. They thought it was a characteristic of the Cab Franc vine itself. Mm-hmm. So
wild. Yeah, grapevines are fascinating. Very fascinating to learn all about it. If you have a backyard vineyard, keep it going and make your own wine. It's great times. All right, well, let's try some wines. We talked about Cab Franc. We're going to start with Merlot, and then we'll taste Cab Franc next.
Awesome.
we go.
Cool.
Right. All right. Well, Merlot 2021. These are both 2021s, which I'm loving our 2021s. I think they're coming into their own right now. They're not tasting young, but they're not tasting old or tired. They're tasting right where they should be. And like I mentioned earlier, we took out this vineyard. So I didn't make Merlot this year. This was the first year that I did not make Merlot since 2007, but we're planting new Merlot in 2027, not next year, but the following year. So this wine is still available at the tasting room. We're down to 30 cases, so maybe come out on Black Friday and buy some while we still have it. But I think our Merlot is really classic Merlot aromas, bouquets. You get a lot of fruit, a lot of cherry. There's a lot of floral notes to it too that I really enjoy with our Merlot.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, and Merlot, took a bad rap because of Sideways. It's come back in some respects. And there's people that maybe didn't see the movie or haven't, or that was a long time ago now.
Enough time has passed, yeah. Merlot is a variety that, unfortunately, to your point, took a bad rap from the Sideways movie, and that's what really catapulted Pinot Noir. But in the process of doing it, they really sideswiped Merlot. And Merlot is not super common to see in a standalone bottle like this as it used to be, which is a shame. It's because it's really a nice grape, can make really nice standalone wines as this one.
Yeah, and in France, Merlot is still, we're talking about how Cabernet is king. Merlot for them is king most of the years. I mean, they make a lot of Merlot. They don't call it out. It might just be a Bordeaux blend of some sort, but they primarily use Merlot in most of their vineyards in that part of France. So it's a great grape, grows well, especially in Paso. I mean, it's the Merlot vineyards that we have produce great wine, good color, good mouthfeel, good textures, all those things that I'm searching for. Well, let's move to Cabernet Franc. So we got our purple label here. I always change the color of the label dependent on the variety. Another 2021 wine.
Thank you.
Yes, Cabernet Franc. All right. So the Merlot, I made 250 cases. The Cab Franc is 270 cases, so very similar. Neither of these were in new oak. They were in once used barrels or twice used barrels. So when that happens, you're really respecting the fruit. You're getting the taste, the flavors, the characteristics inherent in the vineyard. We're not giving them, like if this wine smells smoky or barbecue-y, well, that's because of the vineyard. That's a flavor coming from the vineyard, not from the barrels, because this did not have any new oak during aging. But yeah, so this has a bigger nose, I want to say. Like, it just kind of pops more. There's more complexity in our Cabernet Franc. This is higher alcohol too, so it's going to have a longer finish. And Cab Franc, typically known to taste bell pepper, green olive, green leaf. It can have a vegetative quality. Our Cab Franc has a hint of that, but it's also there's a lot of fruit to it as well. So it's got that green herbaceous characteristic that gives it some freshness, but then there's also a lot of fruit to back it up. So again, it's tasting wonderfully. I mean, it can still age. If you buy a case of this on Black Friday, have some of it for Christmas, and then save some for next Christmas, and see how it ages. Very ageable wine, very tannic, wonderful Cabernet Franc.
It's very nice.
All right, well, thank you so much, Eddie. This was really a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
I loved hearing about. Maybe the grape industry as a whole is in a tough spot right now, but things are going to change. We're gonna pull through. Like I said, the wines that have been made the last few vintages have been outstanding. So you as a consumer, you don't need to be concerned about the quality of wine. So, retooling, replanting, old vines going out and new vines coming in, a lot happens. Tariffs might affect this in a positive way for California. So keep drinking California wine, keep coming to Paso. There's a lot to explore, a lot to experience, and I love doing it. I love making wine. So thank you, Eddie. Keep it up. I look forward to working with you next year. We'll have some blocks for sale. We're still going to sell some Pinot Noir, some Cabernet. I'm going to make some, and then I'm going to sell some too. So I'll be working with you again.
Looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody. See you soon, and thanks for watching.